Welcome to the AEN Stories channel.
If you told me 10 years ago that the messiest incision I'd ever deal with wouldn't involve a scalpel, I might have laughed, signed whatever consent form you handed me, and gone back to rounding. I'm Drive. Nathan Cole, 44, board-certified general surgeon, lover of checklists, coffee strong enough to qualify as a controlled substance, and former poster child for guy who has it all on paper. My life used to look very tidy from the outside. I had the job, the house with the white trim and the lawn I didn't actually mow, the respectable car I never drove because the hospital parking garage hates bumpers, and a wife people would introduce as "Oh my God, you haven't met Julia yet? She's an attorney, trial lawyer, she'll correct you, smart, charming, with a cross-examination voice that could make a traffic cone confess." We were the kind of couple older relatives pointed at Thanksgiving and say, "Now that's a partnership." Surgeon and lawyer. Brains and more brains. Our calendars looked like game boards. Or days, depositions, conferences, hearings, we'd merge them on Sunday nights at the big kitchen island like generals planning a campaign. We joked that between my malpractice premiums and her billable rate we personally kept 3 zip codes in business. I loved her. I don't feel any need to downgrade that verb, even now. Our origin story was annoyingly cute. She'd slipped on ice outside the hospital one February, sprained her wrist, and landed in my ER because she refused to go anywhere but the teaching hospital. I had been called down to consult on a different patient, saw her arguing with a resident about whether she could still type, and thought, that is the most stubborn human being I've ever seen and I want to talk to her forever. I walked over, made some dumb joke about lawyers finally having a reason to sue gravity, and she laughed like the world hadn't already disappointed her. We got married under a rented arch in our parents' backyard. Small crowd, big wine, someone's cousin with a guitar. I remember her hand in mine, and the look she gave me when we said for better, for worse, like we were both very clear we were signing up for better and would send worse back for a refund. For a long time, better showed up on schedule. I got promoted to attending, she made partner at a mid-sized firm that thought the sun rose over their letterhead. We compared war stories over takeout, my near misses in the OR, her courtroom theatrics. People would ask if we ever got tired of hearing about work. We'd look at each other and shrug. Work was how we knew we were alive. Here's where the story stops sounding like a brochure. The first cracks were small, hairline fractures in a picture frame. Julia started using the phrase "I've got to go handle some things" more often. Late-night client emergencies. Weekend conferences that didn't show up on the firm's website. She'd toss a blazer in a bag, kiss me like she was leaving for a spin class, and vanish for 2 days. I told myself, as any good 21st century spouse does, that hustle culture is ugly and this is the price of ambition. She'd always been driven. Maybe I just missed how much. My job is nothing if not time-consuming. Surgeons don't work bankers' hours unless the bank is on fire. So I gave her the benefit of the doubt. That's what love looks like in the early chapters. At home, she got cooler. Not cruel. Just room temperature in places that used to be warm. Less small talk, more silence. Less "how are your residents doing?" And more "can we not talk about blood at dinner?" She started policing my schedule. "Why are you on call again this weekend?" And then disappearing on hers. It felt like being scolded by someone who wasn't showing up to their own appointments. I could have lived with that. Marriages ebb and flow. We all get seasons where we'd rather talk to the dog. What I couldn't live with was the night at the fundraising gala. Hospitals love galas. Nothing says we care about community health like 20 tables of people in rented tuxes competing to see who can clap the longest for a slideshow of sick kids and new MRI machines. Our hospital's foundation threw one every year: black tie, bad chicken, excellent wine. It was, historically, our thing. I'd wear the same suit I'd had since residency, she'd pick a dress that killed the room dead, we'd smile for photos with donors and try to save enough energy to complain about it in bed afterward. That year, she got ready like it was a performance review. Red dress. High heels that looked like a structural engineering challenge. She barely let me zip her up. In the car, she scrolled her phone while I practiced my speech about the new surgical wing in my head. We walked in under chandeliers and polite laughter. The chief of surgery shook my hand like it came with a grant. The hospital CEO hugged Julia extra warmly. She'd done some pro bono work for the foundation once and had been everyone's favorite shark since. We made our rounds. I told the one-time the power went out mid-surgery story to a table of donors who love the idea of heroism as long as it comes with a tax deduction. Julia drifted away at some point, guided by a man I recognized from the local bar association donor list, a client of hers, big corporate type with a watch that could fund a wing by itself. I finished my little speech, didn't faint, didn't swear, got the applause, sat down, exhaled. I went looking for Julia, glass in hand, tie already regretting existing. I found her near the back of the ballroom, in the little alcove where people who truly hate crowds go to breathe. She wasn't breathing. She was kissing her client. Not a peck. Not a drunken, ha, we're European now cheek thing. Full, slow, eyes closed, hand on the lapel, the kind of kiss you don't accidentally give someone whose invoices you pay. For a second I assumed I was hallucinating from the chicken. Then my feet decided this was happening and walked me closer. They pulled apart when they saw me. Her hand stayed on his lapel like she was anchoring herself to his bad decisions. "Hey," I said. I wish I could say I delivered the line with cinematic gravitas. It came out like a guy who just found a severed finger in his salad. Julia's eyes flicked to mine. There it was, a flash of panic, followed very quickly by something else, calculation. The client cleared his throat. "Nathan," he said, like this was a PTA meeting. I looked at her. "Work going okay?" I asked. Humor is my default tourniquet. She straightened, smoothed her dress like she was erasing the scene. "Don't make a scene," she said. "Someone already did," I said. "I'm just here for the aftermath." She took 2 steps toward me, heels deadly on marble, and lowered her voice to a tone I'd heard her use on witnesses who were about to learn what perjury felt like. "Listen to me very carefully," she said. "If you say one word to anyone, about what you think you saw, about my personal life, about my relationship with my client, I will file a formal complaint with the medical board. I will request a full review of your practice. I will make sure they look at every chart, every surgical note, every late-night dictate. You'll be up to your neck in audits. You will lose your license before you ever make me explain myself in public." Threats in my world usually involve lawyers because they're the ones who know how to weaponize boredom. Hearing it from my wife, in this place, under these lights, felt like someone cracking my sternum without anesthesia. I did what I do in trauma situations when I don't yet know which organ is bleeding. I froze just long enough not to make it worse. "Enjoy your evening," I said. It was either that or throw something, and judges frown on both, but one looks worse in court later. I left the gala early, without her. Drove home on autopilot, hands clenched on the steering wheel so tight my knuckles looked like they'd seen a ghost. The house felt wrong. It's amazing how quickly furniture can become evidence. The next few weeks were, scientifically speaking, a disaster. Surgeons are not supposed to bring their personal problems into the OR. We talk a big game about focus, compartmentalization, the sanctity of the sterile field. We are cowards and liars if we pretend we are immune to being human. I started waking up at 3 a.m. replaying the gala in my head instead of running through my case list. I'd stand in the scrub room, staring at the sink, watching my hands go through the motions while my brain made flow charts of divorce outcomes. In clinic I'd forget which room I'd just been in. My chief pulled me aside once and said, "You look like 5 miles of bad road. Everything okay at home?" I lied. I said the hours were getting to me. He looked unconvinced but not surprised. Then came the near miss. It was a routine laparoscopic cholecystectomy, gallbladder removal. Bread and butter general surgery. We joke we can do them in our sleep. You never should, of course, but the muscle memory is real. I'd done hundreds. Middle-aged woman, recurrent gallstones, conservative management failed, in we go. Halfway through, I clipped a structure I shouldn't have. If you've never been in an OR when something goes wrong, it's hard to describe the way the air changes. The monitors don't scream, they complain. The anesthesiologist clears their throat. The scrub tech goes very still. On the screen, where there should be polite anatomy, a little plume of red appears. It's not a geyser. It's just wrong. In that instant, your world shrinks to a very specific decision: fix this or make it worse. My heart rate doubled. My hands, mercifully, did what they've been trained to do. I recognized the bile duct, realized I'd grazed it, and corrected before we turned a bad day into a malpractice seminar. We converted to open, repaired the injury, closed carefully. The patient recovered. On paper, it was complication recognized intraoperatively and managed appropriately. In my head, it was almost the line between good surgeon having bad day and front page story. Afterward, in conference, Morbidity and Mortality, the meeting where we confess our sins with PowerPoints, I presented the case. I admitted distraction. I did not say my wife threatened my license at a gala and I haven't slept since. You can't put that on a slide. The department gave me a warning. We can't have another one of these, the chief said. If you're not fit to operate, take time. The implication hung in the air: we can make you take time. That night, sitting alone in the call room, still wearing scrubs stiff with dried sweat, it hit me: I spend my days cutting out diseased tissue. I lecture residents about margins, about not leaving behind even microscopic traces of the thing that will kill the patient. And I was walking back into a house that felt more and more like a tumor I was pretending didn't show on the scan. The sentence came, corny and perfect: I'm going to stop cutting around the rot. I'm going to cut it out. Not from a body, from my life. Internal lion, they call it in the self-help books people leave in break rooms. Mine woke up somewhere between the or and the parking lot. You don't get to rage your way through this sort of thing. You have to do what we do best: document. Observe. Confirm. Then act. Julia's world, like mine, runs on paper and passwords. I wasn't interested in catching her cheating. I'd seen enough. What got my attention were some offhand comments she'd made over the past year about creative retainer arrangements and moving some things around for clients. I'd always tuned out when she talked about contracts. Legalese is my kryptonite. Now, sitting at the kitchen table at 2 a.m., nursing my third cup of regret, I started to wonder, if she was willing to weaponize the medical board against me, what was she willing to do in her own arena? Hospitals have IT departments staffed by wizards. Our wizard's name is Raj. Mid-30s, endless hoodies, the only person in the building who can make Epic behave and the only one who knows how to fix the coffee machine without voiding the warranty. He'd helped Julia once when she had a problem with her VPN on my laptop. They'd exchanged emails. He'd been very clear about the limits of what he could do. He'd also been very clear about audit trails. I caught him in the cafeteria one day, halfway between a security patch and a sandwich. "Hypothetical question," I said, sitting down. He gave me a look. "Those are the worst kind." "If someone," I said, "were using hospital systems to access or store documents they shouldn't be, say, legal contracts unrelated to the hospital, would there be a record of that?" He took a bite, chewed, stared at me. "Do I want to know why you're asking?" "Probably not," I said. "Do I need a warrant to ask you to look at it?" "If it involves PHI, yes," he said automatically. "If it involves potential fraud by someone using our network and I bring it to compliance as an internal concern, no. It's literally my job." He lowered his voice. "Is this about Julia?" I didn't answer him out loud. He nodded like I had. "Give me a couple of days," he said. "And don't use your work email for anything dumb." 2 days later he showed up in my office with a folder and a face like he'd seen a ghost with a law degree. "Everything I'm about to tell you," he said, "I'm giving you as a colleague worried about institutional misuse. I've already flagged it to compliance. You should talk to a lawyer before you talk to your wife." He'd pulled logs from my hospital account, specifically, remote access sessions associated with a certain MacBook Julia liked to borrow because, as she once put it, your hospital Wi-Fi is faster. He'd also pulled records of external storage connected to our network, cloud services, e-sign platforms, all the stuff the attorneys love because it makes contracts appear out of thin air. There they were, multiple logins from our home IP to a document repository linked to her firm, using my hospital VPN as a tunnel. Uploaded files with names like retainer agreement amended, fee schedule settlement, and, my personal favorite, client consent signed accompanied by metadata showing signatures dated on days I knew she was out of town and clients had allegedly stopped by for signings. Raj hadn't opened the documents. That would have been a HIPAA-adjacent nightmare. But he'd seen enough in the logs to know there were patterns. Same client names popping up across multiple consent forms. Same timestamps. Same IP. Whatever she's doing, he said, she's using your devices, our network, and probably some people's names who would be very interested to learn where they've been lately. I sat with that. My wife wasn't just cheating with her client. She was apparently cheating on her clients, with contrived contracts. I hired my own lawyer the next day. Not a friend of a friend. Not someone from her circle. A boring, middle-aged, ethics-obsessed attorney named McGowan whose website looked like it hadn't been updated since dial-up. He was perfect. McGowan listened to my whole story without interrupting, then asked for three things: the gala details, Raj's logs, and any physical documents of Julia's I had access to that weren't obviously privileged. I produced a manila folder Julia had left on the hall table one day when she was in a rush, a just work stuff, don't worry about it bundle. I hadn't opened it at the time. Now, with McGowan's guidance and rubber gloves metaphorically on, I did. Inside, retainer agreements with signatures that looked off. Photocopies of ID cards. A settlement consent form where the client's name was spelled 3 different ways on 3 different pages. Email printouts where Julia had written, "We'll backdate the consent, easier that way," followed by a winking emoji that belongs nowhere near a legal document. "This is not garden variety sloppiness," McGowan said. "This is the kind of thing the Bar Association salivates over." "Do I confront her?" I asked. He shook his head. "No. You document. You don't alter. You don't threaten. And you sure as hell don't blackmail. You're a surgeon. Act like it. Gather all the imaging before you cut." We spent the next few weeks building what in my world would have been called a chart and in his was called a file, timelines, cross-references, affidavits from a couple of her clients I quietly encouraged to review their paperwork. "Hey, quick question, did you understand you were consenting to that fee?" Who said, colorfully, that they had not. Raj wrote a memo for hospital compliance about the misuse of network resources, carefully omitting anything outside his lane while still singing the right tune. We preserved everything we could with as many witnesses as possible. Julia, meanwhile, acted like she was on a winning streak. I'd come home from 12 hours of trying not to nick bile ducts and find her laughing on the phone, saying things like, "We'll make sure the judge sees it our way, don't worry." When we crossed paths in the kitchen, she was almost giddy. "You look stressed," she'd say, sipping whatever organic concoction was supposed to elongate her life. "You should meditate." One night, as I was headed out for a late case, she called after me, "By the way, if you're still thinking about playing martyr about the gala, don't bother. I've got judges who've known me 10 years. You? You're a guy who cuts people open for a living. Who do you think they'll believe?" I stopped with my hand on the doorknob and looked back at her. "You keep talking like you've already won," I said. "That's a dangerous habit in front of a jury." She laughed. "I don't lose," she said simply. "I have connections." And there it was, the fatal flaw, she believed her network was stronger than the rules. I've seen that in the or too, people who think their talent outruns protocol. They're the ones who forget to check the sponge count. The Ross Romney Udar the big blow wasn't dramatic in a Hollywood way. No screaming courtroom, no gavel flying slow motion. It was me, McGowan, and a very quiet meeting with the State Bar's Ethics Committee Intake Council. We submitted a detailed complaint. Dates, documents, logs, witness statements. Not about the affair, that was gossip. About the forged consents. The backdated settlements. The misused signatures. The potential conflicts with judges she bragged about having in her pocket. The committee took it from there, which is the boring, beautiful way justice should work. They opened a formal investigation, notified her, subpoenaed her files, interviewed the clients we'd flagged, and did their own digging. The hospital's compliance office, meanwhile, launched an internal review about outside legal work being conducted over our systems on my credentials. That was awkward. I took my lumps for not securing my devices better. But when they realized I'd been the one to come forward, the tone shifted from "how could you" to "thank you, please never do keys in the ignition again." Julia's confidence lasted exactly until the bar investigator called her bluff. From what I heard, she went in hot, charming, dismissive, full of "everyone does it" and technicalities. That tends to play poorly with people whose job title includes discipline. The day the decision letter arrived, I was in the surgeon's lounge, doom-scrolling through a study about resident burnout. My phone buzzed. "McGowan, it's done. Call me." My hands shook more calling him than they ever have holding a scalpel. "They found multiple violations," he said, voice steady. "Forgery, misrepresentation to clients, misuse of court documents, failure to maintain client confidences. She's disbarred, Nathan. License revoked. Effective immediately." Disbarred, I repeated. It's a word I'd heard on TV. Hearing it applied to my wife felt surreal, like they'd announced they were revoking her gravity privileges. "They're notifying her clients," he went on. "She'll lose most of them, if not all. There may be criminal exposure down the line, but that's up to the DA." I thanked him. I sat there in the lounge staring at the vending machine, which, to its credit, did not offer commentary. When Julia got the news, she didn't come home right away. She stayed at her office, I later found out, shredding things that had already been scanned into 3 different clouds and 2 investigators' brains. When she did walk through our front door, she didn't look like the glamorous shark from the gala. She looked small. Angry, but small. "You did this," she said. "No," I said, surprising myself with how calm my voice sounded. "You did this? I just stopped helping you hide it." "You ruined my life," she hissed. I thought of the patient whose bile duct I'd grazed, and how close I'd come to pretending it hadn't happened. "No," I said. "You almost ruined other people's lives. I just treated the infection." We didn't have a movie scene fight. We'd moved past that. Lawyers got involved. Papers were filed. We divided property according to laws I didn't write and furniture I had no opinions about. The marriage ended with signatures witnessed by a notary who, I checked, was actually present. There's a weird quiet that follows the end of a long-term relationship. For months the house sounded like it was waiting for something. I threw myself into work, not the healthiest choice, but at least productive. I took a short leave to get my head straight, did some therapy, surgeons and therapists, natural enemies, surprisingly helpful together, and gradually my hands stopped shaking when I scrubbed in. I realized somewhere in there that I didn't want to spend the rest of my career apologizing for almost mistakes and past ghosts. I didn't want my professional identity to be the guy who nearly clipped the duct when his life went sideways. I had been floating the idea of a surgical practice that did things differently for years, less bureaucracy, more patient-focused, more continuity of care instead of patch and discharge. So I did what Julia always said she admired in her clients before she became one of my cautionary tales. I took a risk. I left the big hospital system, on good terms, with a handshake and a standing offer to come back if my little venture crashed and burned, and partnered with a couple of like-minded colleagues to open a boutique surgical clinic. Conservative souls with spreadsheets told me not to call it boutique, we called it cold precision care instead. My mother liked the ring of it. So did I. We found a space in a medical office building near the hospital but not owned by it. We gutted it, built out tours, a consultation suite, and post-op bays that didn't feel like they were punishing you for needing help. We hired nurses who could have worked anywhere and chose us because they liked the mission statement, precision in everything, cuts, words, billing. We invested in software that actually talks to itself. We set up a little coffee bar in the waiting room that doesn't taste like sadness. Patients came. Slowly at first, word of mouth, a couple of referrals from colleagues who trusted me enough to send their families. Then more. People liked that they saw the same faces. They liked that I had time to explain, really explain, what we were doing and why. They liked that the billing department, when they had questions, answered the phone like humans. Every once in a while someone would say, "Hey, didn't your wife used to be that lawyer who?" And then trail off, embarrassed. I'd say, "Yes. And I'm the surgeon who didn't look away." That usually ended it. Do I look back now and laugh? Not exactly. But I can tell the story without my pulse spiking, and that's its own kind of humor. My residents love the gala anecdote, once I stripped out the parts too personal to turn into a teaching point. They think it's wild that a woman would threaten a surgeon with the medical board to cover her misconduct. I tell them the uncomfortable truth: it's not that wild. This job attracts ego. So does law. So does any field where people's lives and fortunes hang on your competence. The lesson isn't don't marry a lawyer. It's don't hand anyone a weapon they can use to make you abandon your ethics. Cole Precision Care is doing well enough that my accountant smiles more than he frowns. I work a little less than I did at the big hospital. I sleep a little more. I still wake up some nights thinking about that almost mistake, but now it's part of the story I tell in Here's what I did, here's why, here's how I fixed it, here's what I changed so it won't happen again. The same is true of my marriage, honestly. Did it. Screwed up parts. Fixed what I could. Changed what needed changing. Moved on. If there's a moral in all this, and people love a moral, especially from someone in a white coat, it's not a fancy one. It's the same thing I tell my patients when they're terrified and looking at me like I can outvote biology: face the problem. Cut where you need to. Don't pretend the rot isn't there. That applies to gallbladders, contracts, and marriages. These days, when I walk into my own clinic and see my name on the door, Cole Precision Care in neat blue letters, I don't think success. I think margin. We got it this time. Clear around the bad stuff. Enough healthy left to heal. And yeah, on my better days, I can even smile about the fact that my midlife crisis wasn't a sports car. It was finally taking my own advice. Thank you for listening my story. If you want more raw, real, and gripping stories like this one, subscribe to the AEN Stories channel. Your support keeps these stories alive.